Welcome back to the Human Perspective. Today, I'm privileged and very happy to be able to introduce you to Kenny Freeze. Like myself, Kenny grew up in Brooklyn, New York, so those of you from Brooklyn, New York, yay, yay, and is currently living in Berlin, Germany. Kenny is an American memoirist and poet. I can't say that word well. Kenny Freeze has a master's in theater writing, and a majority of Freeze's books and poems are based on his experience as a disabled gay Jewish man. He's received numerous awards, but in particular 2 Fulbright scholarships, which many of you may look at applying for now or in the future, and currently teaches in the MFA Creative Writing Program at Goddard College in Vermont. Kenny's latest book is In the Province of the Gods, which details his journey as a disabled foreigner in Japan. Kenny is currently touring in the United States on his book In the Province of the Gods, and I was able to hear him read a piece of his book the other day at Georgetown University this week, and I encourage you all to read this book. It's really great. I also encourage you to look more deeply into other writings that Kenny has done. So, Kenny, thank you so much for being with us today. This is going to be a really difficult interview. I was telling Kenny that he's probably the most complicated person that I've interviewed so far, so we're going to get a little tidbit of who he is. When did you first become interested in writing?
I was playing around with writing ever since I was a kid, writing little plays and things like that, so it's been a long time. Yeah.
And were you supported by your family?
Yes, very much so, and my teachers, and I was very, my parents thought I could do anything, and if that's what I wanted to do, I was perfectly going to do it. Yeah.
It's a very competitive industry, so what do you think has made you different in as much as you continue to write and publish, get awards for the work that you're doing, and continue to write and publish?
Yeah. Well, it's coming up with the right idea and something that could interest me, because my books take a long time to write. So I get an idea, and it takes, the last book was 10 years ago, and this now is here, so it's a lot of work. You know?
In preparing for a book, what type of research do you do?
I started working using research with my book before this, the History of My Shoes and the Evolution of Darwin's Theory. I knew nothing about science, I knew nothing about Darwin, I knew nothing about the theory of natural selection and evolution, and so I just started reading. And so since that book, most of my work is based in some sort of research. I mean, the new book, In the Province of the Gods, was supposed to be about my looking at disability in Japan, how it was the historical figures, how it was represented in the culture, and it moved to something else, but that's where it really started, with research.
Mm-hmm. So you recently came out with an article in the New York Times in their weekly series, and the title of the article is "The Nazis' First Victims Were the Disabled." You correctly speak about the atrocities that were going on in Germany, and also about how people in the United States and Germany, but I think it's fair to say around the world, really have very limited knowledge about the history. What drew you to write that article, and tell us a little about the responses?
Yeah. Well, I originally went to Germany to look at the lives of disabled people who grew up in what was East Germany, in the communist part of the country. And I soon realized that I couldn't understand anything about disability in Germany unless I went back to the Nazi era and even before then. And so the book is called Stumbling Over History, and that's what really happened. Everywhere I went, I stumbled over something about something that that happened in the 1930s or in the 1920s to disabled people. And so then I was really surprised that a lot of Germans, most Germans I spoke to, didn't know about this. They didn't know about Action T4, which was the Nazi euthanasia program that killed around 300,000 disabled people. And that that disabled people were the first group to be mass killed, mass murdered, and that the connection to the Holocaust was really great because a lot of the testing on the methods of mass killing were done on disabled people, and then the staffs of the T4 killing sites were moved to Sobibor and Treblinka and Auschwitz.
Which are
concentration camps. Yeah.
You mentioned in the article visiting a museum.
Mm-hmm.
and being the only person in that museum, that particular
Yeah.
exhibition. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I happened to arrive in Berlin during the anniversary. It was the 1983. It was like the 75th anniversary of the Hitler's taking power, and the 80th anniversary of Kristallnacht. I think that's reversed, the 80th and 75th. And so there were a lot of exhibits going on, and one of them was this exhibit about this ward for special care that basically experimented and killed disabled children. And so there was this room that was set up with 30 cribs, and each one had the name of a child who was killed or experimented on before they were killed, and their little story. And I spent my first 4 weeks of my life in an incubator, and I couldn't stay in that room very long. I couldn't breathe, and had to leave the room.
And recently in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
2016, there was the murder of about 19 disabled people who were living in an institution. What have people in Japan said about that?
They're horrified about it. And I think that once it happened, I don't know what the coverage was over there. I only know what the coverage was in the West, and especially in the United States. And I know that my colleagues in Japan wrote asking me to send words of encouragement or solidarity with the Japanese disability community.
Right,
at the
I
time.
wrote a statement too.
Yeah. So, but it shows that these things are still happening. And I think the thing that's important was that the person that did the killing was a former employee who worked there. Yeah.
And I think stigma and shame is
Yes.
something that continues to haunt this issue around the world, where people, in the case of the Japanese, many of the families didn't even want the names of the children to be identified, which was different than what you saw in the museum in Germany with those 30 children.
No. They had their first name and an initial.
Oh, not a last
Most
name.
of them don't have last names in Germany. The victims, yeah, it's very similar. They say there's medical privacy laws, but it's mostly families don't want to have their family name associated with somebody that was disabled and killed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a good situation. Yeah.
So, you have a disability, it impacts your walking. When you were beginning to write and thinking about traveling, did you have any concerns about your ability to travel?
I didn't when I was younger, because my disability didn't really impede me to do things, and I also had that supercrip mentality where I just did things. But as I got older, I really, things changed. And I was concerned when I went to Japan. I was concerned about having to take my shoes off before I go into people's places or in temples, and I recount that in the province of the gods. And as I've gotten older, I blew out my knee. I dislocated my right kneecap in 2009. So since then, I use a wheelchair for distance. But as you say, I'm not using my wheelchair on my tour, and I'm alone until my husband meets me in New York tomorrow. So, but I have a disability where access is very different and easier for me, because if we come to a place and the elevator isn't working, I can get up and walk, and Mike can take the chair up, the stairs. That's not the case for everybody.
So as we're drawing to a conclusion already, I'd like to know what you think about the importance of mentoring disabled individuals who are aspiring writers.
It's become increasingly important to me, and I have this idea for the Disability Arts Mentorship Project. DAMP is the acronym, and I would love to find funding to do that, because the first generation, we're getting older, and we need to pass on our connections, our knowledge, our experience, our training to the next generation, and there's really not an institution to do that yet.
Did you go to regular schools?
I did. I was one of the first people to be like you, to be mainstreamed in a school in Brooklyn. Yeah.
So how did you get interested in disability? Because you could have been writing about anything. Why disability?
When I was in graduate school, I didn't know any disabled people, and I had a therapist, and He told me that
Physical therapist?
no, a psychologist,
okay.
and he told me that he would come see a play I was directing if I went to see Irv Zola, who was a professor at the school.
Irv Zola, read his books, Zola.
Yeah, and so I just did that, and then when I moved to California, I met Marilyn Golden, the disability rights activist, and so I started at the top, and that's why I met you through Marilyn, yeah, and so and I just became increasingly interested in disability, and then it wasn't enough for me to meet a disabled person and be friends with them just because they were disabled. I had to have common interests. And then I met disabled writers, a whole cadre of disabled writers and artists, and that was that. Finding that community is really important.
So I'm sorry we've come to an end. For those of you who are aspiring disabled writers, definitely you should look at Kenny's books and write to him. We've had a wonderful time talking with you. I think we've learned a little bit about many different things. And he has to catch a train right now to go to New York. We will be posting a link to his website. I'd like to thank you for coming to the house today and speaking with us, and continue to bring the voices of disabled people in the United States and around the world to a broader audience. Please leave your feedback in the comments section down below for this show and others. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the like and share button on this video. It was a pleasure. Thanks.